Bartenders, what is the most memorable interaction you had with a customer? He wasn't completely hammered, but I'll share my favorite interaction I've had with a bar guest that honestly was a huge eye-opener to how to live my own life instead. The restaurant/bar I work at is an odd concept. We have a lot of different things going on throughout the week, so some nights it goes from a nice place to grab food and drinks for dinner, to straight up dance club/high volume bar. I love it because it's just a glorious, well executed, and managed crap show, so walking in always keeps me on my toes. Anyways, getting off topic. We do trivia on Sunday and Monday nights, and our table taps, big tubes of beer that sit on the table or bar so everyone can pour their own beer, are half priced all night. So we were a fairly new establishment and we were still getting a lot of new people in to see what all the fuss was about. This guy comes in and he's probably late 40s, normal looking guy. My first thought was he looks like a friend of mine's dad. I'm fairly observant and noticed his hands look like those belonging to someone who was in construction, or some sort of manual labor type profession. Nothing wrong with physical labor. I've done the work myself. I just sort of scan people naturally and harmlessly in my head, put them into a certain stereotype and then try to see if it holds up. I love it when the negative stereotypes don't hold up. I had been trying to work on not being so judgy, which I could have been like, this guy's probably gonna be a typical sort of construction guy, whatever. I told him about the special and that it actually comes out cheaper to buy the beer tower at half price than drink 3 of the large beers. He wasn't overly grumpy or snarky, just very short with his answers. Just seemed like he didn't want to talk much. If you want to listen, I'll talk, that's for sure. So I talked him into the tower. He watched whatever sports games were on the TVs, drank some beer, and ate some food. Eventually he loosens up and gets to talking about how he just moved back in the area in the last few months after living in New Orleans for 25 years. As we're talking about New Orleans, a classic rock song, might have been Led Zeppelin, they're one of my favorites, so we'll say Ramble On came on and I said, ooh, this is a great song. So we start talking about music and he mentions he lived right outside of some fairgrounds in New Orleans and his wife and daughter would walk down the street to concerts that would come through. Widespread Panic was one band he mentioned that stood out and sort of bonded us because I had just seen them at Hangout Fest in Gulf Shores not long before this night, and we both liked some of the same bands. Throughout our conversation he would sort of randomly mention, well yeah, my daughter's normally with me during this time, but she's in college now and down in Florida on spring break. Which I mistook for a dad missing his daughter, who is now growing up, and the beers sort of bring that emotional side out. Finishing our music conversation, he pays out after he's been at the bar for about 3 hours. Our convo was sort of off and on as I went back and forth to other guests. He gets up and asks which way to the restroom. As he comes back from the other room and by my bar, I'll never forget it as long as I live. I'm not just saying that, but the events of our seemingly normal encounter got burned in my brain. He stops and sort of leans up to the bar and looks me in the eye and says, hey man, I'm sorry if I was a butthole when I came in earlier. And I told him he didn't come across that way. Guess he realized how short and sort of unapproachable he was being at first, and the brewskis brought out that apology. And he said, well, thank you for still talking to me. It's been a rough day because this is the first year my daughter hasn't been with me today, and it's the 4-year anniversary of my wife of 30 years passing away, so thank you for not just dismissing me. He reached his hand out to shake mine, and told me to have a good night and walked out the door. I'm a fairly emotional guy, not in a dramatic way, or anything, just very empathetic, and I had recently lost my grandmother with whom I was very close. So I got teary-eyed, had someone watch my bar, and go outside to smoke a cigarette and settle down, and it's still an encounter I think of almost every day. Those minutes after that just thinking by myself were so profound.